there's going to be a ton of people there in exactly the same position as you, so you want to make sure that you're standing out from the crowd. The American film market is coming up in a couple of weeks at the start of November, and so there might be a lot of filmmakers out there wondering whether they should attend the film market. So this video is really about whether you should attend AFM in a couple of weeks, but also more broadly, what are the pros and cons of attending these markets? When is it worth going versus not going? And what are the things that you should do and that you should have in your possession to make sure that you're getting the most out of the market and that you're positioning yourself and your project in a way that you do stand out from all the other filmmakers there. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Alexi Uzas. I'm a film producer based in Australia, and I make these videos to help you on your filmmaking journey. So let's dive in and try and work out whether it's worth you spending the time and money and energy to go to AFM in a few weeks. So the first thing that I want to go through is who's going to be there versus who's not going to be there. What are the costs of attending? What does it mean in terms of the finance that you're trying to raise? What are the scenarios where I think you should go versus I think you shouldn't go? And if you do decide to go, what are some of the best practices that you can implement during that time to make it worthwhile? So first thing is who's there versus who isn't there. And this really applies to any film market. And the key people that are at a film market, particularly at AFM, are people in the film industry. So it's really the core of it is sales agents who are pitching their films to distributors, to the buyers, and then producers who are pitching their films to the sales agents. That's really the core of a film market, and that's the core of the activity that's going on. Now, on top of that, there are some film commissions that attend film markets, and there are debt financiers who attend film markets. Now, if you're not sure about the difference between debt and equity, make sure you check out a video I did that explains those two. It's important to know that at these film markets, it's really debt financiers that are there, and there's no equity financiers. So who isn't at a film market? Well, there's no private investors, and there's no actors or talent agents at these markets, particularly at AFM. Now, the reason it is so specific with AFM is that AFM is not tied to a film festival. So in markets like Berlin, which is the European film market, Cannes and Toronto, which really those three plus AFM make up the four key markets over the year, and they're kind of evenly spaced out. So those other three have film festivals going on at the same time. And so it's much more common if you attend Cannes, for example, you're going to get a much broader range of people. You are going to get private investors there. You are going to get agents and actors and, really everyone and anyone that makes up the industry. Now, they might not be all attending the market, right, which kind of runs parallel in another building to like the festival, but you're all there, you're all really in close proximity. Whereas AFM is very different. There's no festival tied to it. And so it really is predominantly for the industry. And that's really important to keep in mind, because the one big difference is, you're not going to find any private investors and you're not going to find any actors or agents. So what does that mean in terms of your desire to obviously go there and try and finance your film? One thing to keep in mind is that if you're going there and you're pitching to sales agents or distributors, then you're really only going to be raising 10 to 20% of your total finance, right? Because those types of companies only make up that as a percentage of your total finance. And so you're really going to be speaking to minority stakeholders of the project, and you're going to be attending the market to try and meet those people. So it's important to keep that in mind, that you're not going to go there and really finance your whole film like that. That just won't happen at one of those markets, because it's not the place for that to happen. I would also say, even with those other markets that are tied to film festivals and you do have a broader range of people, it's still difficult to find private investors, for example, because if they're there, they're going to be there like for a specific film or with specific filmmakers. It's not like you're going to an area and you're just meeting all these financiers who have the ability to finance your film. That's not how it works. So back to AFM, one thing that you want to look at then is the cost of going, right? So if the kind of best outcome that you're going to get is 20% of your total finance, then you want to look at what the cost is. So obviously, if you're not from LA, you're going to have travel costs, you're going to have accommodation, you're going to have food, you're going to have like travel to and from the market, depending on where you're staying, and then you're going to have the accreditation. So the accreditation ranges from like, I think a day is like $200 or $300, all the way up to about $1,000, I think, for the whole time, and maybe even more, and that's US dollars. So when you add all those up, it does end up being a decent enough chunk of money. And so what you want to think about at that point is really the benefit of spending that money for the best outcome, which could be 20% of your finance. So the way that you start to, or I start to like analyze whether it's worth me going to a market is really like, where am I at with specific projects? And is the project far along enough where it's going to make it worth my time and money going to one of these markets? So in my view, the best time to go to the market, so this is like do go, is number one, you should have a specific project that you're pitching. You don't want to go there and kind of just be walking around with not much in mind, no really specific purpose. I think you want to have a very clear project that you're trying to finance, and that's why you're going to that market. Of course, you can have a couple, but that leads me on to my next kind of qualifier, which is you want to make sure that all your assets are ready. So your screenplay should be ready, your lookbook should be ready, and your finance plan should be ready. Those are the three key assets that you're going to need to attach a sales agent or distributor. So you want to make sure that they're actually ready before you attend a market. And if they're not ready, then I think it's probably too early to go, because if you have a great meeting with a sales agent or a distributor, they're going to ask for your screenplay. And in order to get that meeting, you'll probably need to send them your lookbook. And if they read the screenplay and they like the screenplay, they're going to want to see your finance plan, or they'll also want to talk finance in your initial meeting. So you really want to make sure that all those assets are ready before you go. Now, one asset that is even more obvious is that if you've shot the film and you have a completed film, then that's a great asset to have and to take to a market, because at that point, you're not there trying to raise finance, you're there trying to sell a finished product. And they are in the business, sales agents and distributors, they are in the business of making money from finished products. So if you have a finished film, I think it's absolutely at that point can be worthwhile going to a film market. Now, ideally, given that you're only going to raise up to around 20% and you're going to have to incur the cost and time to go to this market, I would say that you want to have as much of the other finance in place as possible. So the more real a project is, the easier it's going to be to get meetings, and the easier it's going to be for you to then get some real traction after the market. So if you have 80% of your finance in place and you tell them that in the meeting, then things are going to be able to progress much quicker, because you could say, hey, I have a deadline of whatever date, so I need a response by then. All the other finance is in place, we're ready to go. Also worth keeping in mind is sales agents really want to know when the film's going to be delivered, because they're looking at what their next 12 months of product looks like, and if they need to fill any gaps. And so if you have a film that's ready to go, or that's really close to getting finance and going into production, that's going to bump you up the priority list for them, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for product that they can sell, kind of 12 months or hopefully earlier from that date. So I would go to a film market and really only pitch those projects that are the furthest along when it comes to finance, and absolutely making sure that you have all those assets ready. So when should you not go to a film market, or specifically AFM? Well, I think like if you're looking for private equity and that's what you want to achieve, don't go to AFM. Like there's no high net worth individuals hanging out at AFM. Doesn't happen, right? So that would be one reason not to go. You're much better off, like if that's your goal, you're much better off trying to find private investors or network in other ways to get introduced to private investors rather than go to AFM. The second one is if you're still in development, so if you're still developing the script, it's too early. It's not worth going to AFM just to kind of pitch your idea in a vague way, right? You want to be, like I said, as far along as possible in the financing stage, and even having raised some finance is like the best position you can be in. And so development is like the other end of that spectrum. So it's just too early to go. So I wouldn't go if you're still in development. The third reason not to go is if you can't book enough meetings. So if you just can't book enough meetings with sales agents and distributors, then you may end up going to the market and actually end up just like sitting in the foyer. And in my experience, like that's happened to me, right? Where I've been to a market and like in retrospect, I was probably too early. Like I just wasn't at the right point in my career where I was able to really make that worthwhile. And so what happens is you end up kind of just wasting a lot of time. You end up just on your laptop in the foyer doing work that you could be doing at home or at your office. So I would say that if you can't book those meetings, then it's not going to be worthwhile. Now, how do you know if you are going to be or you're not going to be able to book those meetings? Well, the first one is like if you already have those relationships in place, you probably will be able to book them, right? If you don't have those relationships in place, then what I would suggest that you do is that you try and get introductions through people to introduce you to sales agents, distributors, because that's going to increase your ability to get a meeting with them. The second thing to think about is that try and book your flights or your comm in a way where they could be refunded. Because what you could do is you could book everything and then you could try and get as many meetings as possible. And then the closer that you get to the date, you can then work out, well, is this actually going to be worthwhile, or is it kind of going to be a bit of a blowout, a bit of a waste of time? And so if it is looking like that, then if you've booked things in a way where you can refund them, then you can of course just pull the pin. So if you do decide to go to AFM, here's some things that I would think about and maybe some best practices. So the first one is, and this is actually true for any film market, is book your meetings if you're a producer and you're pitching a new film for the second half of the market. The reason is that in the first half of any market, the sales agents are there to sell their product, right? That's really what they want to do at those markets. And they're going there like really, that's like their key objective. And so that's their focus when they first arrive. They're trying to get as many sales as possible and they're trying to get that as quickly as possible. So in the second half of the market, their time is freed up a bit more and they have the time and the people and the resources to start thinking about and looking at new projects and potentially like new producers that they haven't met before. So that's number one. Like I said before, number two, try get introductions to these people before you go to the market, because that would just increase the likelihood that they take the meeting and that they show up. The third is that you can use a platform called Sanando, spelled with a C, and that will actually tell you who's attending the film market. So out of those sales agents and distributors, who's actually going to the market, because you don't want to spend your time reaching out to companies that aren't even going to be there. So that's really important to do. And that way you're going to know that, those people are actually there. The next one is, like I said earlier, if you can, book things that can be refunded so that you can always pull the pin. Now, in terms of when you're at the market, so number one, book as many meetings in advance. Number two, if you can't book meetings for whatever reason, or someone's just not getting back to you, you can always just drop by one of the booths or rooms, depending on which market you're in, and see if you can organize a meeting for a later time. So, drop by like a company's meeting room or booth, whatever it is, kind of early in the morning, and see if you can organize a meeting with someone who's there looking after the schedule, and it could be for like a later time. So I would try and do that. Like if you still haven't filled up your calendar, as soon as you get there, that's what you should be trying to do. Basically, you want to just stack your calendar with as many meetings as possible to really maximize the time that you have when you're there. And so that's really how I think about and work through whether it's worth going to a market. And so in any given year, I might go to 1 market, 2 markets, or 0 markets. And it really is highly dependent on just where my projects are at and whether I think it's worthwhile going. Now, the great thing is once you've been to a few markets and you have established a relationship, because everything is done online, these days, especially with like sending screeners and things like that, you can really then get away with not going as consistently as every year or even every second year. And so if you do build up those relationships, the great thing is that those can last for a pretty long period of time. And then you really end up just going to the markets to kind of keep those relationships in place, because everything else is just happening via email or phone calls or now Zoom. So I also think that having worked through all those, at some point you do want to go to a market, right? So it is worth going to a film market to basically just go through the experience of what it's like to be at that market, what it's like to be pitching your film verbally. And so I do think that there is a lot of benefit to going to markets. I do think that everyone should go to a film market at some point, but I think the point at which you go is important to look at, to analyze, and because that will make sure that you're getting the most out of that market. So that's it for this video. If you liked it, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section below. And if you do want help getting your project ready for financing, if you want to get all those assets ready, if you're looking for someone to work with to help you raise finance for your film, check out the link in the description below. You'll be taken to a 20-minute free training where I'll take you through how we finance and produce our feature films and help other filmmakers do the same. And then you can book a call to speak with me or a member of my team. So that's it for this week. We'll see you on the next one.